Call the meeting of December 3rd Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. Can we rise and do respect to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Sure. Benner? Present. Thema?
Present.
Nichols?
Here.
Bailey? Absent. And Basardi? Here.
Okay, I'll take an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Same sign for no. Motion carries. Take it. Approval of minutes. Motion for approval of minutes. Of May 7th, 2018.
I move that we second I'm sorry, I move that we accept the minutes on May 2nd.
Just make a motion on that, didn't
Now we did the agenda, now we're in the minutes
you? Okay. I'm with you then.
of May 7th. All in favor?
Aye.
Nays the same sign?
Yes.
You voted no?
Yes, I did.
Motion carries. Before we go into the public hearing, Mr. Davis, did you have anything for the board?
Yes, I do. Do you mind if I speak from the podium? So I can see?
Please.
Thank you for the opportunity to be present before the Zoning Board of Appeals. I just have a few words I would like to pass along as a reminder and follow up to our various trainings that we've had over the years, and maybe to refresh the public on the role of the ZBA and the procedure of the ZBA. Without a doubt, it's always been my opinion that the ZBA of any community holds a very special role within the community. There are various branches of local government, but the ZBA is the appellate body, what I call the final relief valve from strict compliance with the ordinance. The ZBA is in fact the only body in the organization that has the discretion to create a variance from the ordinance, to interpret the ordinance, or to hear and decide whether a decision by another body has been made in accordance with the law. So in a sense, you're the local Supreme Court, you're the final relief valve, and you play a very important role. Under the state law, your role is echoed in its importance by the fact that every decision of the ZBA is final unless there's an aggrieved party who files an action with the circuit court. There's no body in this local government that reviews your decisions. There's no other commission, there's no other board that hears or overrules anything that the ZBA does. Puts you in a very unique and important position. And remember, you have other bodies of government, your legislative body, and your planning commission, who takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to enact ordinances which are all coming before this community cloaked in validity. And here, in the normal sense, because most of what ZBAs do is hear a variance request, it's really a request from an applicant to deviate from the ordinance scheme. It's a request to not comply with the ordinances. And therefore, there has to be a record, a due process record. And you know in my training, I always pound on the podium and I always tell you about how important the record is. When we're done here and after the planner very capably introduces the nature of this variance request, we're going to open a public hearing. And at that time, you're going to listen as a board. You're not going to engage, you're going to listen to the comments, and we're going to create a public record with respect to the variance request. And when the record is closed, you'll have an opportunity to further questions to the applicant and to deliberate among yourselves. If and when you're ready to act on any variance, including the variance tonight, there would be a motion in order, and the motion must legally be supported by your factual determinations. So you need to take notes, and you need to take time to write down your thoughts as this public hearing progresses. The number one lawsuit that we're seeing in the circuit court right now is challenges to ZBA decisions that are not supported on the record. And each motion now, according to the new case law, has to contain that record. So if you were to make a motion to act on a variance, you have to act and say, I make this motion because of the following facts. And you have to list them. They have to be part of the motion. And if you take a look at how we end up in circuit court, and then I'll sit down and I'll just read this to you and to the public. This is a state law. Any party aggrieved by a decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals may appeal to the circuit court for the county in which the property is located. The circuit court shall receive the record and the decision to ensure that the decision meets all of the following requirements. 1, that the decision complies with the Constitution and the laws of the state. 2, that it's based on proper procedure. 3, and listen closely to 3, it is supported by competent material and substantial evidence on the record as a whole. And 4, represents the reasonable exercise of discretion that the ZBA possesses by law. So the key there is that a person aggrieved by the decision of the ZBA, that means you could have a person who is aggrieved because you granted a variance. You could have, on the same day, a person who's aggrieved because you didn't grant the variance. So your decision can be challenged in either direction. And I urge you, and I ask you to follow the procedure and the controlling case law that says we will conduct an orderly hearing, and I will ask that the chairperson say at least 3 times, is there anybody else who wants to be heard this evening on this variance request? Is there anybody else in the audience who has a document they would like to submit into this record? And I would urge you to say that 3 times until they're bored with you and no one else wishes to speak. And at that time, we will close the public hearing and you will deliberate towards a ruling. And I would ask that any motion that any person makes be supported. Now, procedural advice. If Elgin makes a motion and has 4 very concrete reasons to take action on a variance, and Sue, you would like to second that motion, you can second that motion and say, with the friendly amendments of my 3 key points. So now we have 4 plus 3 if Elgin accepts your 3 as friendly amendments to his motion. So now when you read back to the record will reflect a decision that was based on 7 factors. Your original 4 and your 3 friendly amendments that were on your mind. And that would become the motion as a whole. So, that's the way the law shakes out. I can promise you this is a very important role. I can promise you that the last 2 variance hearings I've been at, I've given the same presentation. And as soon as I sat down and they were done, somebody made a motion and somebody seconded it and they approved it and they never made a record and we were sued. And we had to remand and do it all over again because of a lack of record. And I always tell people that this happens, and it happens. So let's get it right. Let's have a good public hearing, and let's follow the outline of the review standards. Make a motion to your pleasure on the issues presented, and support that motion, and come to a decision. Any questions? Any questions from the public on procedure? Mr. Planner?
Nope,
Did I
sounds
say
great.
anything silly?
Nope, sounds everything.
Okay, thank you.
Proper and right.
Okay, thank you.
Maura, can you give us brief overview of
Yes.
what they're asking for?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're here to discuss a request for a dimensional variance for 77 Glasgow Street. This has been applied for by Mr. Dave Weckel of the Valley Building and Repair Company on behalf of Michael Maruska, who is in the process of purchasing the property. The property is located on the west side of Glasby Street, and that's south of Broadway. A two-family residential structure had existed on the site previously, but was destroyed by fire. And so the application is to construct a new two-family residential structure. The site is located in the RM, multifamily residential district, so therefore two-family residential is permitted by right. And the total area of the lot is about 4,062 square feet. The issue before us tonight is that as proposed, the building footprint would require requesting two variances from our standards. The first being a front yard setback is requested, variance is requested. In the RM district, we normally require a 25-foot front yard setback. Currently, there is no setback because the building has been removed. So the proposed setback from the applicant is 6 feet 4 inches from the property line, the front property line that faces Glasby Street. So given that's a 25-foot minimum required, the variance you'd be granting, you would consider is a 18-foot 8-inch variance for the front yard setback. Similarly, the applicant is requesting a rear yard setback. In the RM district, that's a 30-foot minimum requirement. As proposed, they are requesting a 5-foot setback in the rear. That would result in the request for a 25-foot variance. So when it comes to this variance, the variances that you consider, the zoning ordinance outlines in section 9.7.8 that you must find that there's a practical difficulty in the way of carrying out the strict letter of our ordinance for the applicant. This section also outlines the various criteria that you have to consider when it comes to potentially granting a variance. There are 6 different factors. I'll go over that very briefly. The first being that whether compliance with the strict letter of these restrictions would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted use. Given the depth of this lot, it's kind of a triangular configuration, and it's a slightly odd in that because of its pie shape. So as a result, the depth from Glasby Street on the side lot lines is about 52.2 feet on the north side. And actually goes down to 38.3 feet when you're on the south side of the lot, facing Glasby. So as a result, you applied a 25-foot front yard setback and then a 30-foot rear yard setback. They technically would overlap, and therefore, which is not the intent of the setbacks. The setbacks are intended to create what we normally call a building envelope. Say the lot was 100 feet in depth. You take off and you have a setback of 25 feet from the front, 30 feet from the rear, and then you would require or be provided for the owner would be having a 45-foot deep building envelope. So within that 45-foot area, they would be able to place their structure. So by having these, when you strictly apply our setback requirements, front and the rear, they overlap each other. There's therefore no building envelope. So that definitely would unreasonably prevent the applicant because they're not even have the opportunity to build any structure. So this would once again prevent the owner from using the property for any type of structure. Second criteria is whether granting this variance would do substantial justice to the applicant as well as other property owners in the district. If granting the variance would allow the use of the piece of land for a structure, and it would also allow them to construct something that was previously existing on the site. Other property owners within the district have the right to construct a structure based on their the configuration of their lot, because they have the building envelope that is, so by granting the variance, we would be granting substantial justice to this property owner. We note that as the applicant is proposing a two-family residential structure, it would be about 57 feet wide along Glaspie Street, and then it would be about 26 feet in depth from Glaspie. So with the two-family, it's a ranch-style structure, so it would have approximately 740 square feet roughly in floor area. So I just wanted to provide that. And if we were to grant any lesser of a variance, then the potential would be for a smaller footprint for each unit, and therefore, 740 square feet, a pretty modest sized structure. Anything a lot lesser than that, you're starting to get into what some people call efficiencies or something to that effect. It makes it very difficult beyond 740 to have everything you need for a structure, a bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, and some type of common living space. So granting the variance would provide substantial justice to the applicant. The plight of the third criteria you have to consider is whether the plight of the applicant is due to unique circumstances of the property. This is unique because basically the platting and the lot splits that have occurred in that area over time have resulted in this lot configuration. So it's rather unique because the other lots within this platted subdivision are capable of having a building envelope to construct a home, whereas this one does not. So that's a very unique circumstance that's not normally found throughout the rest of the village. Fourth criteria you must consider is whether this problem is self-created or not, whether the applicant is requesting something due to their own actions. But it is not self-created because the applicant did not configure or go through and apply and result in creating these lot line configurations. This is something that had happened previously. So it's not a self-created situation. You also must consider whether the spirit of the ordinance will be observed, public safety, welfare, security, and substantial justice done. The spirit of the ordinance for these setbacks is to provide on the lot an area for the building envelope and open space area. That's why we have these required yards, 25 feet from the front, 30 from the rear. So we would note, though, that his proposed configuration will allow for open space on the south and north. He's meeting the required setback of 10 feet on the north, and there's about 20 feet on the south side lot line for open space area. And even though technically in our multifamily district, we don't normally require any type of lot coverage maximum, that's another method we use to make sure there's some green space and open space on a lot. There is none in the multifamily district, but we note that in this particular situation, because of the dimensions proposed, they're having about a 36% lot coverage. In a single-family district, we have usually a 40% maximum. So technically, while not required, the ability to have some free space still exists. So we believe that these dimensions would allow for the spirit of the ordinance to be observed. Finally, the sixth criteria, which has multiple individual items, is whether the board must determine whether the variance granted is the minimum necessary to meet the requirements of the applicant. When considering the minimum, if we were to grant a lesser variance, will that not provide substantial justice and relief to the applicant? I just went over the dimensions as proposed. They're proposing 740 square foot units. A lesser variance, meaning requiring more yard space, will result in a smaller building footprint, and so therefore the units would be smaller, and it's potentially less marketable, and also the units that have a hard time meeting modern standards that most residents would look for in terms of square footage for a home. Another criteria is whether the granting the variance will not increase the hazard of fire. Based on the setbacks as proposed, they do not require any additional construction standards based on the building code. So because the building code does, if buildings are too close to each other, the building code does have standards that say you must increase your construction quality to maintain fire rating of the walls. But this proposal does not require that. So therefore, there is no increase in the hazard. Granting whether the variance will not diminish property value. Once again, there was an existing structure on the site. The applicant is proposing to place another two-family residential structure on the site, so they're merely reestablishing a use in a structure that was already part of the neighborhood. So they're basically reestablishing it, and it's not something that current property owners would find, in our opinion, that they would not find it's something in stark contrast to what existed previously. It was there before they were being established. You have to make sure that granting the variance will not alter essential character of the neighborhood. Once again, this is a two-family residential structure in a residential neighborhood that already had a structure on the site, so it's not changing the character in our opinion. And the granting of variance will not impair the quality of adequate supply of light and air. And this, as mentioned, there are still setbacks being proposed, so therefore the supply of light and air is not infringed. Those are the criteria you have to consider, and then if you'd like, I can make my recommendation right now, or wait till.
Okay, so the public hearing is for us to consider tonight is a request for a principal structure setback variance for PO 0427232004, commonly known as 77 Gillespie. Take a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion that we open the public hearing at 7:20.
Support. I have a motion by Mr. Nichols and a second by Susan Bizzardi. All in favor?
Aye.
Does that take a roll call for a public hearing?
We're fine.
Same sign for no? Motion carried. We're now in the public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that'd like to speak to this?
Tell me when you want me to start.
Okay. Mr. Watt, would you please state your intentions?
Dave Weckel, Valley Building Repair, longtime Oxford resident, local builder. My clients, Maruskas, are sitting here in the audience with us this evening. For those of you who've been around a while, this piece of property is contiguous to the old police station, if you remember that. There was a one-car garage and one small office. And I know Sue will remember that, but that was back in the probably early 60s when this building was built, and that's when it was relocated. And I believe at the same time, those lots were reconfigured, because when I look at the legal description, I mean, you should have a survey in your packet. You'll see that this street, or this property fronts Gillespie Street, as does the property next to it, which is a corner lot. And the description on this one is the southerly one half of Lot 6, and the one to the north of this property of 77 Gillespie, if you'll look on the survey, it says northerly one half of Lot 6. So that at one point was platted as Lot 6. So it's been platted for a while. Our zoning has changed through the years, and I think the most recent one was in 2017, so it's pretty recent. This was not RM when they were constructed, but this RM now. So now we understand that we're going to comply with as many of the specifications that are required for RM. And as Mario suggested and stated, we comply with all of them except the front yard and the rear yard. So that's why we're asking variances for those two items. The another note here. We're asking for these two-family dwellings, but there was one correction I want to make. It was stated that it's a ranch. We're actually planning to do a two-story. And the reason we're doing a two-story is we could park underneath the ranch. I think that's an easy way to explain it. So we also have enough room for parking on site, but if you've had a chance to go by those properties, parking is pretty difficult. So we have room on the north side in the setback to place a vehicle if necessary. We have room on the south side to place a vehicle, plus we have room for the tenants or owners of the premises to park under their residence. The final construction drawings will be completed once the approvals are received. We have some preliminaries, but they're not ready for a permitting process yet. The height is going, we have a limit of 25 feet. Well, we come in at 23, 4 or something like that. So we're under the maximum height. The 80-foot lot width, which is a minimum width, well, this parcel is 96 in the back and 100 foot in the front. So it complies, as Mario suggested, on both those dimensions. But it's just like this. And I think your survey represents that pretty well. We have a slight cantilever in the front, and that's where we're asking the variance to go to that point. So 2 foot further back is where the foundation actually is. So there's more room on the ground than we're asking for. We're asking for the variance to the whole building footprint, even though part of it's up in the air. The corner house currently has a 2-foot setback. And that also shows on the survey that was done by Houston Kennedy, again a local surveyor. And I think that when Glassby was originally constructed, it was probably a 30-foot road, 34-foot road, something like that. Now it's a 66-foot road with curb and gutter, and so it's quite a bit wider, the right-of-way, and so some property was taken for right-of-way. Someone was probably compensated in the past, it might have been 20 years, 30 years, I don't know when, even though I've been around a long time. But I know that the road now is quite a bit larger through there. It actually goes right through the industrial park as it continues south. So there is existing curb and gutter. The sewer and water taps are existing, and there's also two curb cuts. So there was 2 driveways there. Those driveways still exist, so those do not have to be changed at all to meet this drawing. We spent a lot of time taking the property and making the house fit the property. So that was our intention. We got down to the minimum amount of variances we needed were the front and the rear. And everything else we could comply with. I'm open for any questions at any time, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to make any statements? Would you stand up and state your name and address, please?
I have some handouts I'd like to give you.
Thank you.
My name is Gail Ricks. My address is 4151 Seymour Lake Road, Oxford, Michigan. I own a small private property management company, and I am the authorized representative of the owners of both 52 Broadway and 56 Broadway, two of the properties that adjoin the vacant non-conforming lot at 77 South Gillespie. I respectfully request that my presentation packet be included in the official record of tonight's meeting. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you in advance for your time and consideration. I and the owners of both 52 Broadway and 56 Broadway object to the granting of this variance request due to the substantial harm and injustice already inflicted upon the adjoining property owners, particularly the owners of 52 Broadway. The owner or variance applicant of 77 South Gillespie has seized approximately 8 feet of the property of 52 Broadway, which constitutes most of the driveway and a large portion of the backyard, preventing access by vehicle or by lawn mowing equipment to the rear yard. This seizure of property places the proposed duplex in the backyard of and approximately 10 feet from the rear of the house of 52 Broadway. Granting this variance would cause substantial harm and substantial decrease in the property value of 52 Broadway. Granting this variance would destroy the quiet enjoyment of the backyard of 52 Broadway. Please note, the owners of 52 Broadway have engaged an attorney and are disputing the property seizure. The owner or variance applicant destroyed infrastructure at 52 Broadway, specifically ripping out a trenched-in drain under the driveway. A police report for malicious destruction of property was filed, and again, legal remedies are being pursued. The son of the owner of 77 South Gillespie filed a complaint, and the village prosecuted, at the taxpayer's expense, a charge of criminal trespass against an innocent contractor hired by me who inadvertently backed his pickup across the vacant lot to deliver material to 52 Broadway. I have suffered severe financial damage and incalculable stress from this action. I, out of my own pocket, paid $3,000 to retain a criminal defense attorney to fight the egregious persecution of my contractor. Upon bringing this matter to the attention of the village manager, who was unaware of the situation and unfamiliar with the attorney representing the village, the matter was dismissed. The tenants of 52 Broadway and their children have informed me they have been threatened with prosecution of criminal trespass by the owner and the son of Gillespie lot. These encounters have caused the tenants great distress and confusion, as the property line fence belonging to 52 Broadway was moved 8 feet into the rear yard when their driveway and rear property was seized. 77 South Gillespie is a non-conforming lot of record, and we strenuously object to the granting of this variance in accordance with the Village of Oxford zoning ordinances, which specifically address nonconformities. Article 8, nonconformities, Section 8.1 intent states, "It is the intent of this ordinance to permit these nonconformities to continue until they are removed, but not to encourage their continuation. It is further the intent of this ordinance that nonconformities shall not be enlarged upon, expanded, or extended, nor be used as grounds for adding other structures." 8.1c, discontinuation of use, states, "If such nonconforming use of land ceases for any reason for a period of more than 90 days, any subsequent use of such land shall conform to the regulations specified by this ordinance for the district in which the land is located." Section 8.3, nonconforming structure. 8.3b addresses damage to nonconforming structures and states, "Should such structure be destroyed by any means to an extent of more than 50% of its fair market value as determined by the assessor, it shall be reconstructed only in conformity with the provisions of this ordinance." Section 8.5 addresses nonconforming lots and states, "If the use of a non-conforming lot requires a variation from the area or bulk requirements, then such use shall be permitted only if a variance is granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals. I would again ask this board to consider the two adjoining properties. 52 Broadway and 56 Broadway are single-family residences. While zoning for Gillespie lot is RM, the lot is way too small to accommodate a duplex housing 2 families. There is no front yard and no rear yard for outside recreational use or storage, and is not in keeping with the style of neighboring properties. The proposed duplex does not conform with the intent for multifamily use as addressed in Chapter 2, Purpose of Districts, Section 3.2.2, RM, Multifamily Residential District, which states, the intent of this district is to provide areas in the village for multifamily dwellings at a moderate density, access to amenities, adequate space for vehicular parking, outdoor recreation and plant growth, and adequate distance of buildings and parking from adjoining residential districts. As previously stated, this proposed duplex would encumber the rear yard of 52 Broadway, which has a walkout basement that may incur flooding without adequate land to provide for drainage and runoff. Zoning ordinance requires the front yard setback to be a minimum of 25 feet. Applicant is requesting a variance down to only 5 feet 4 inches. These may have changed from the time that I received my information. Zoning ordinance requires the rear yard setback to be a minimum of 30 feet. Applicant is requesting a variance down to only 5 feet, which is already 8 feet into the rear yard of 52 Broadway due to the seizure of the driveway and the land. This is not moderate density as described in the intent for multifamily districts. I would also like to see the fire marshal's evaluation of this variance request and its impact on the safety and welfare of neighboring properties and their residents. I would like this board to consider where bikes, toys, barbecue grills, trash containers, and other outdoor equipment for 2 families would be stored so as not to cause conflict between neighbors. Regarding parking, in Article 7, General Provisions, Section 7.1.9, Parking Requirements, a duplex requires 4 parking spaces. Applicant shows no dedicated parking and only a small driveway not suitable for parking. The minimum size of a standard parking space is 9 feet wide and 18 feet long. This would require a minimum of 648 square feet of dedicated parking. There is no on-street parking on Gillespie Street nor on Broadway Street. It has been argued there was a structure there before. Consider Section 8.7, damage by fire or other catastrophe, which states, any non-conforming structure or structure housing a non-conforming use that is damaged by fire, flood, or other means in excess of 50% of the structure's pre-catastrophe fair market value as determined by the assessor shall not be rebuilt, repaired, or reconstructed except in complete conformity with the provisions of this ordinance. There were numerous inaccuracies and deficiencies with the application submitted requesting the variance for the non-conforming lot at 77 South Gillespie. In the interest of brevity, I've addressed those inaccuracies in your packet. As you can see, this is already a convoluted, congested, and contentious corner. 77 South Gillespie is a non-conforming lot of record, and this zoning board of appeals has no obligation to create a horrible situation for the village or the neighboring property owners by approving this request for variance. Conversely, granting this variance would be in violation of the intent and numerous articles of the Village of Oxford's zoning ordinances. I would implore this board, collectively and individually, as fiduciaries of the well-being of the Village of Oxford, to decline this request for variance for 77 South Gillespie. I would also request this board to consider Section 8.8, Village Removal of Non-Conforming Uses and Structures, which states, In order to accomplish the elimination of non-conforming uses and structures which constitute a nuisance or are detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare, the village, pursuant to Public Act 110 of 2006 as amended, may acquire by purchase, condemnation, or otherwise private property for the purpose of removal of the nonconformity. Please know that the owners of 52 Broadway and 56 Broadway and myself would be very grateful for the opportunity to work with the village to straighten out the convoluted property lines of these parcels and forever and all time put an end to the nonsense and hostilities regarding the lot at 77 South Gillespie. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board?
Okay.
Can he get back up again?
Is there anyone else?
Is there anyone else before I?
Allow a double dip?
Well, as the applicant, I think I should be able to respond to
Yeah.
comments.
We just want to make sure everyone has a chance.
Sure, I appreciate that. One thing that really struck me was, the insinuation was that we trespassed and we stole the property. We did not do any of that. The first thing we did, I asked Mr. Maruska to get a survey. I said, I know it's a small lot, get a survey and we'll see what we're dealing with. And we found out what it was, and I looked at it with Houston Kennedy and we figured out what we had to do to make it buildable. I let him know I think we could do this. So they wanted to stay in the community. It was an affordable lot, and so we moved forward. The survey stakes were the only things that we put on and we didn't do that. We have a surveyor put the survey stakes on the property. So there's no 8 feet taken away from any yard. It's just, maybe it's 8 feet that was used that didn't belong to them. Maybe that's how we looked at it. I can't say one way or the other, but I just know what we have done. The building is parallel to the rear setback, and that way we could have more room for parking in the front. If you'll look at the survey, the variance we're asking for is for the southeast corner. If you look at the northeast corner, we don't need that much of a variance. But I would assume that a front yard variance would cover both ends of the house, of the building. So we requested it for the greater variance. But it's a lesser variance to make the project work. 10 feet away from the property line is more than sufficient for fire code. I could tell you as a builder that if it was closer than that, you'd have to do a firewall. And the aerial views we got from Property Gate, Oakland County, there's a fence and there's a shed that encroaches on the property also. They haven't had an issue with it at all. They just want to put something in there so their son has a home to live in, and then the rental income for the other unit. There's not going to be a problem with storage of boats and cars and things like that. Like I say, it's a 2-story building. They fit inside the garage, and that would be where they would go. If you have a garage, why wouldn't you park in there? Recreation-wise, well, we've got recreation all over. We've got the Pollyant Trails close. There's the ball fields are there. We've got Spring Lake for swimming. There's lots of amenities that aren't even taken advantage of by most of the people in our community. I wasn't aware of all these other situations that had happened on this piece of property, so I can't comment on all of them, but I do know that when I looked at the survey stake, and I could see that there was a drain on this proposed property from the second house in, so that must be 52, because I would think they get bigger as they get away from M24. So if there's been litigation or criminal charges or whatever, I'm not aware of them. And I'd like to proceed as we are unless my clients say otherwise. I think they still want to do this project.
Thank you. I have 2 letters that I'd like to put on record. One from 5 South Gillespie indicating that he has no objections to the project. And one from Irene Fisher, 77 South Gillespie, that has no objections to the project. Do you have those letters, Madam Clerk?
I
Okay.
do.
All right, that enters the record. Now, one last, does anybody else have anything else they need to say? Okay, please take the podium and let me know who you are.
I can. I'm Kathy Rittendale, and Mike Maruska's wife. We're in the process of buying the lot with the contingency that we'd be able to build on it. I just wanted to say that we're building this with the intention of tenants being a single person or someone with maybe one child or no children. We were never really thinking this as, 2 big families were going to live here, and I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
The owners of 52 Broadway attempted to buy the lot. Joe Matador, the village mentioned to me that he thought the lot wasn't worth $15,000. I believe it's assessed at slightly right around $14,000. We could not purchase the lot. It's more valuable, I guess, as a developer, as a speculation. And it had been the intent of the owners of 52 Broadway to purchase the lot and divide the property between the 2 existing homes and straighten out that convoluted property line. And the owners would not sell it because it's more valuable if this board grants a variance for speculation. I just want you to consider that too, that what's the best thing for all parties concerned.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? If there's no other public comment, I'll close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing at 7:45.
I have a motion by Nichols, a second by Benner to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, does the board wish to question the developer or McKenna on the...
If I could ask for information from the consultant in reply to what's happened here, if you would give us your comments.
Well, when I haven't heard of these instances of property violations property trespass or of issues with the lot lines. But typically, that issue is a dispute between 2 private property owners. It's not anything that the village can necessarily resolve because they're just 2 different claims for the location of the property lines. And so the application before you is based upon a survey, a certified survey, indicating what that professional believes the property lines are. So you would be making your decision based on those property lines. Now, whether those come into dispute later or whether those get moved, once again, that's something that could or could not happen in the future. You can only make a decision right now based on the information in front of you. And what, as I mentioned, the village is not in the process, nor does it want. The village is not in the process of trying to establish and verify the location of property lines. That's something that's why we have certified surveyors registered with the state, and that's why we take their information as a professional at face value of what's presented in front of us. With regards to some of the issues with regards to nonconformities, generally everything she mentioned is correct. But the issue with regards to, for example, the nonconforming use refers to a use that is not permitted in the zoning district. Say, for example, a business was located in the RM, or an apartment building was located in a single-family district. Those are the type of non-conforming uses that we would eventually see removed. And when they cease operations, typically if they cease operations for a certain amount of time, then those types of uses are not going to come back in that district. As proposed, the two-family structure is a use permitted by right in the RM district. So the use itself is not a nonconformity. When it comes to the removal of nonconforming structures, if I recall, and forgive me, I didn't see, haven't known physical structure that was there previously. But I believe from aerial photos, it was located very substantially to the north side of that lot. And if that was the case, then that was probably most likely a non-conforming structure from our 10-foot required setback. And those are the instances in which when the house is removed, say the house did burn down, and if it was destroyed more than 50%, and they wanted to come back and build in the exact same location, that's the instance in which a non-conforming structure cannot be located in the same spot. They would have to rebuild it completely according to our current standards, which require a 10-foot setback, which would mean that house couldn't be built in that previous location. And then finally, within the zoning ordinance, it was quoted the text that says, for any non-conforming lot who wishes to construct something that is not in adherence with our standards, just like any other property within the village, they have the opportunity to come before you and request a variance. So it's specifically stated that this non-conforming lot could be constructed upon if you granted a variance that meets our criteria for variance. And that's what I reviewed previously, the 6 issues. And that's why it's still in our opinion, based on the setback requirements as proposed, it's an unnecessary burden on the property owner to establish a use permitted by right in the district. And it's a modest location, we believe, in terms of the dimension you requested. And yes, please.
I guess I want to interject here. The one subject that came to mind that was recently provided to us was that of drainage. That could be a problem on the other piece of property. I believe it's number 52. How would you address that?
Typically, within your zoning ordinance, there would be a requirement that any property owner cannot allow, and forgive me, I'm not sure if this language is actually in your zoning ordinance, but even if it's not, case law has firmly established the same requirement, that any property owner, when they do construction, cannot allow drainage and water to come off and go onto another adjacent property greater than the agricultural rate. Meaning, if water falls on theirs from due to rain, the water that comes onto their property from rain can't be greater than that.
Nor can a new development alter the current drainage patterns.
Correct. So in that case, there would be either at a minimum case law to support any private property owner that feels they've been aggrieved by increased flooding due to construction. And the potential exists that some of our ordinances might state that fact as well. But, it's the responsibility of the property owner whenever anything is developed to bring it to code, not make sure they don't infringe on adjacent people's property by flooding them out.
Did I hear the young lady say about 52 that drainage was cut off? That the drain field was over 77, or the property 77?
Actually, I saw that the pipe was removed. It was about 5 feet long, that was above ground when I saw it initially, and then after that, it was removed. I think if I went over there tonight or tomorrow, you can still see the long grass and the pea stone that surrounded the pipe. But none of that was done by my clients previously at all, so I don't know who did it.
Is that going to be some kind of an impact on our decision here?
I don't think it's an impact, we're building on a slab, first of all.
Okay,
So it's not gonna, we're not gonna have groundwater in the basement or groundwater into a crawl space. So we'll put it 8 inches above grade like building code will require. I should write up there, probably, right?
Yes, please.
Well, the project, before you do that, Mr. Wood, this project would still have to go through the building permit process, which is a different review. The only issue before you this evening are the setback variances. I don't want to say that this is akin to, it's still got to go to engineering and it's still got to go, it's still subject to the building permit process, wherein these actual drawings and your final building plans have to get approved, wherein these issues are addressed.
yeah, he has to go before the planning commission yet, with the plan, site plan, right?
Probably
Have
not
you done that?
not the planning commission, because this is a permitted use.
Okay,
But you will have to submit building plans.
Yeah, that's correct. I have to do building plans, and that will show drainage. And we have to have a 1% grade, and so our finished siding has to be 8 inches above the existing grade. And if we cannot, as Mario had said, dump our downspouts onto their site if it's more than agricultural rate. So what we're probably going to do is put them in pipes and run them around to the front
okay.
and go that way. But the grade actually, I don't know if you have, there's more drawings that I have, and you probably have in your packet. Actually, the men have been provided by Gail, I don't know her last name. But there's topographic lines on this drawing. The numbers are hard to read, but I believe the water runs to the south, and that's the way the ground drain was pointing that I observed, which is gone now. That piece of pipe is gone.
I do know that when you go for the permit, that they'll ask you for the information on parking and everything involved there as well.
Yes, they ask all that, and they're also, even on inspections, we have to put up a soil erosion fence so we don't have things go on to the neighboring properties.
Has the fire chief given an opinion on this at all?
I don't think that he normally would, unless the building department asked him to. They do look at them.
Right.
But I know
The
at
fire
10 feet.
department will look at.
Yeah, they'll look at
At
it.
the building,
At the
Yeah.
building permit stage.
right, that has nothing to do with the setbacks. I was over there and walked around on the sidewalk, and don't these two properties, 52 and 56,
56.
they, to me, look like they sit higher than this property.
Yeah, they are high.
So
That's
if
what I'm
anything,
saying.
their
Correct.
runoff was running down onto this property.
That's correct. Yeah, the water runs south.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You're looking at 740 square feet per unit?
I believe one of them is just under that, and one of them is just over, because one's a 2-bedroom and one's a 1-bedroom.
That includes the upstairs as well as downstairs?
No, that's the upstairs. Now, the downstairs, if you want to count it all,
Right.
how do you want to count the garages? It's a 2-story building. It's 26 by 57, and then it's got the 2-foot cantilever upstairs. But it doesn't, when we're asking for the variance, we ask for the variance for the perimeters of the building. So we're asking for the variance up here. When you drop it down, the building foundation is actually back here on the 1st story. We put the cantilever up in space, and there's another section. I don't have my ordinance with me, but we could build into those areas. I'm not going to build past the setbacks. I don't do that. I'll have it staked.
Sue, do you have any other questions? Elgin?
No, I think I'm pretty well set.
Carolyn?
I think I said all.
Just one clarification on the nonconformity issue that was raised. There's no doubt that all ordinances and state law, discourage the continuation, enlargement, expansion, or perpetuation of nonconforming structures and/or parcels. Here you have a situation where you had if it's a non-conforming structure and it burns down, you can't just put it up. In other words, your non-conforming statute 8.7 says you can't just put it up. You can rebuild it if it's in conformity with the ordinance, and the ordinance includes the variance allowances. Remember what I told you when we started? You have a lot of people who put in a lot of time to enact ordinances in this community. You are a deviation from the ordinance, so of course, a variance is by its nature a deviation from the ordinance scheme. But a burnt down non-conforming structure can be rebuilt if it complies with the ordinance scheme, which means exactly why they're here. They have to seek a variance in order to be in compliance with the ordinance scheme. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I say something, or are we done?
We're done with the public
Public
hearing.
hearing is closed.
Yeah. Okay, so what is the board's recommendation for 77 South Pulaski?
Well, it's my opinion that compliance with the strict letter of the restrictions of the, would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for permitted purpose that they want to use it for. I think it's pretty obvious to me. Another thing that comes to mind is the property, the size will fit within the guidelines of the property parameters. There was a building there before, similar use, multi-occupancy, 2-unit structure. And it looks to me as though this property would work in conjunction with that particular concept.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect? And state the facts and findings?
Well, let me see how I would do this. Okay, I make a recommendation that we approve the compliance with the zoning ordinance standards, which would render the parcel buildable rather than unbuildable.
Is your motion to approve the variances?
My motion is to approve the variances, yes.
Should we,
If we could add the factual support.
should we read into the?
Sure. Let me put everything down in my mind the way we should do this. Based on the findings, I would suggest that compliance with the zoning ordinance standards would render the parcel unbuildable, therefore we proceed. 2, the need for variance results from the orientation of the parcel with reduced depth, creating an impartial building envelope. 3, the resulting lot coverage of 36% is not greater than the maximum allowed for lot coverage of single-family residence use. 4, the variance will provide substantial justice to the applicant and is not adverse to the interest of the other property owners and zoning ordinance. Put some thought into this one. The variance requested is the minimum possible to establish modesty size residential units. I didn't question that. And 6, the need for variance is not self-created. The gentleman did not create this situation.
And that's the basis for your motion to approve the variance?
It is.
Do I have a second on that?
I will second that with the correction of the one word on his number 2, it's impractical.
Correct.
Instead of, I think you said impartial.
Oh, I'm sorry,
or something.
impractical would be
But,
correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, bad choice of words for me.
Okay, Take a roll call vote, please.
Sardi,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Marilyn. Sorry, what's your last name?
Benner.
Benner.
Yes.
Bema,
Yes.
and Bailey is absent.
Okay, motion granted. Is there any other public comment not on the agenda items? Any consultant or administration comments?
I have a comment, I need one of those packets for the record from Gail. She's getting an
Okay.
extra one, so.
Any board member comments? Sue?
Nothing.
Elgin?
Whereas I do understand the concerns for property owner 52 and 56, I believe it's the best interest of the community that we made the decision that we made.
Carolyn?
I disagree.
I'm sorry, the board is commenting.
No comment.
And I have no comment at this time, other than to welcome Sue.
Thank you.
And we are still looking for members to serve on as vacancies on the Board of Appeals, if anybody is interested in serving. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion that we adjourn at 5 minutes after the hour of 8.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay, same sign.